Somewhere in America, a woman named Brenda is on hold. She is calling about her internet bill. Brenda thinks she is talking to someone in Ohio. She is not. She is talking to a city on the other side of the planet, 11,000 kilometers away, where it is 3 in the morning. Here is the strange part. In 2010, a cluster of tropical islands quietly beat India and became the call center capital of the entire world. India had a head start of almost 20 years. India had over 1 billion people. And a country with barely 1/10 of that population took the crown for answering the world's phones. That country is the Philippines. 7,000 islands, typhoons, mangoes, and apparently your customer service call. This is a place most Americans could not find on a map if you gave them a week, yet millions of them talk to it every single day, and they have no idea. So how did this happen? How did a small former colony become the voice on the other end of the line for the biggest companies on Earth? I looked into it because I am a cat and I have nothing but time and a warm windowsill. There are 4 reasons. One is about the way they talk. One is about a war most people have forgotten. One is about television. And the last one is about a law almost nobody bothered to read, which is usually exactly where the interesting things are hiding. Brenda still has no idea where her call is going. By the end of this, you will understand it better than she does. Let us start with the first thing she notices, even though she could never name it: the voice. Part 1. The voice. When Brenda finally gets a human, the human sounds familiar. Not local exactly, but not foreign either. Smooth, easy to understand, weirdly neutral. This is not an accident. It is the single biggest reason the industry moved here. Filipino English tends to land on American ears as clean and clear without the sharp edges of a heavier accent. For a company that lives and dies by whether a frustrated customer stays on the line, that clarity is worth billions. Compare it to the story next door. For years, India was the giant of outsourcing, but American callers often struggled with the accent, and callers who struggle tend to hang up. Agents in India were sometimes trained to soften their speech, to sound less like themselves. In the Philippines, companies found they had to do far less of that work. The neutral sound was more or less already there. Why? That is the mystery underneath the mystery. Accents are not random. They are fossils. They are left behind by whoever held the microphone for the last 100 years. And the reason a person in Manila can slip into something close to a California accent is not luck, and it is not coincidence. It was installed deliberately by someone with a flag and a very specific plan. Companies notice the difference in cold, hard numbers, fewer dropped calls, higher customer satisfaction scores, shorter, calmer conversations. The accent was not a nice bonus. It was the entire competitive edge. But an edge like this does not just grow on a tropical island by itself. Someone had to put it there, generations before the first phone ever rang. To understand the voice, you have to understand who taught it to speak. And for that, we have to go back to a war that ended over a century ago and never really left. Part 2. The war nobody remembers. In 1898, the United States and Spain went to war. It was mostly about Cuba, but when the smoke cleared, America walked away with a prize on the far side of the Pacific that it barely knew what to do with: the Philippines. For the next 48 years, from 1898 to 1946, the islands were an American colony, and colonies get remade in the image of whoever runs them. The Americans did something that would echo for 100 years. They built a public school system and they ran it in English, not British English, American English. Teachers were shipped across the ocean by the boatload to fill the classrooms. An entire generation of children grew up learning to read, count, and think in the language of a country most of them would never see. English did not arrive as a foreign subject on a timetable. It became the language of government, of law, of ambition, of getting ahead. If you wanted a good job, you spoke it. So the whole nation learned. This is the part people miss. The neutral accent that saves companies billions today was not a modern business strategy. It was the leftover of an empire, a side effect of a war about Cuba, of all things. Nobody in 1900 was thinking about customer service hotlines. They were building schools to run a colony. But they accidentally trained the workforce for an industry that would not exist for another 90 years. History does this constantly. It sets things up for reasons that have nothing to do with how they get used. The war planted the language, But a language alone does not make you feel at home on a call with a stranger in Texas. For that, you need something stranger. You need to know their culture better than they know it themselves. Part 3, raised on American television. Speaking the language is one thing, getting the joke is another. When Brenda mentions the weather or a holiday or a basketball team, the person on the line does not just understand the words. They understand the world behind the words. This is the quiet superpower. Long after the American flag came down in 1946, America never actually left. It stayed in the culture. Hollywood movies, American pop music on the radio, basketball, which the country adopted like a religion, and decades of American television watched so widely that agents could genuinely chat about the same shows their callers watched at home. Reporters who studied the industry described agents making small talk about American Idol as easily as any viewer in Ohio. Think about what that does on a phone call. A customer is annoyed, their bill is wrong, and the voice on the other end does not sound like a distant stranger reading a script. It sounds like a neighbor. It knows the references. It gets the tone. That familiarity lowers the temperature of the whole conversation. On top of that came something harder to measure. A culture built around hospitality and patience, where taking care of a guest is treated as a genuine point of pride. Put those together, fluent, neutral English, deep knowledge of American life, and a workforce that is unusually willing to stay warm and calm while a stranger complains for the 9th time about the same router. For an American company, that combination is close to perfect. It is almost like the country was quietly built in a lab to answer the phone. But familiarity and friendliness still do not build an industry with over 1 million jobs by themselves. Culture is only the raw material. Someone still had to turn it into a business, and that took a law that almost nobody read. Part 4. The law almost nobody read. For most of the 20th century, all of this potential just sat there. A whole nation fluent in American English and American culture, and no industry to point it at. The technology was not ready, and neither was the plan. Then 2 things arrived at once. The first was cheap international phone lines and the internet, which suddenly made it possible to route a call from Ohio to a desk in Manila for almost nothing. The second was quieter and far more powerful. In 1995, the Philippine government passed a law creating special economic zones. In plain terms, it offered foreign companies tax breaks and relaxed rules if they set up shop inside these zones. It was a boring piece of policy. It was also the spark. The pioneers moved in. In 1992, a global firm had already opened an operations center in Manila. In 1997, one of the first big multinational call centers arrived. Others followed fast because the math was irresistible. Fluent workers, low costs, generous tax deals, and a government rolling out the carpet. Then came the avalanche. By 2011, the industry employed around 640,000 people and earned nearly $11 billion, growing more than 20% in a single year. And in 2010, the milestone that started this whole story. The Philippines passed India to become the #1 country on earth for call center voice work. A law that most citizens never read had rerouted the phone calls of the planet. Not a battle, not a grand master plan, a tax incentive in a document nobody outside government finished reading. That is almost always how these things happen. The stage was set and the boom was on. Which leaves the only question that actually matters to Brenda, still quietly waiting on hold. How big did this thing get? So here is the answer, plainly. The Philippines became the call center capital of the world because of 4 things stacked on top of each other. A neutral, American-sounding accent, a former colony that ran its schools in English, a culture soaked in American life, and a quiet law that made it cheap to build. None of it was planned as a whole. It just added up, and it added up to something enormous. By 2024, the industry employed roughly 1.8 million people and brought in around $38 billion a year, close to 8% of the entire national economy. Nearly 2 million people awake through the night, answering a world that is fast asleep. Now, one honest correction, because I am a cat and I do not lie. India is still the overall giant of outsourcing. It handles far more of the bigger technology and back office work. The Philippines did not beat India at everything. It beat India at one specific, very human thing: the voice, the actual talking, the staying calm while a stranger yells about a router. And here is where it touches you. The next time you call about a bill, a flight, or a package that never came, there is a real chance the calm voice helping you is sitting in Manila in the middle of the night. It knows your shows. It speaks your language. It is being endlessly patient with you for a living. That patience was 100 years in the making, and it started with a war about Cuba. Brenda, by the way, finally got her internet fixed. She thanked the nice person in Ohio she will never know. But now you do, which honestly is more than most humans manage before lunch. Subscribe or do not. I am a cat.